the attack on Convoy Meridian-7 lasted less than 11 minutes, and by the time it ended, the Threll Ascendancy had made the single greatest miscalculation in its 400-year history of expansion. To the raiders who struck it, a mid-sized pirate confederation operating loosely under Ascendancy protection along the disputed Kethra corridor. Convoy Meridian-7 appeared to be exactly what every prior human transport group in that region had been, a modest civilian logistics convoy, lightly escorted, carrying medical and agricultural supplies to Earth's outer colonial settlements. It was the kind of target the Kethra raiders had struck dozens of times over the preceding 3 years. Always with the tacit understanding, quietly maintained by Ascendancy border authorities, that such raids fell beneath the threshold worth risking formal diplomatic conflict over. What the raiders did not know, because Earth's Unified Defense Council had gone to considerable lengths to ensure they would not know, was that Convoy Meridian-7 was not a civilian logistics group at all. It was a covert asset transport, carrying critical personnel and prototype technology central to humanity's still classified Deep Space Defense Initiative, escorted by a security detachment considerably more capable than its outward civilian designation suggested. Among the 73 people killed in the 11-minute assault was Dr. Yuki Tanaka, lead architect of Earth's experimental long-range sensor network, along with 11 members of her core research team and 41 Defense Council security personnel who had spent the better part of 2 years protecting a program most of the galaxy's other civilizations didn't yet know existed. Secretary-General Elena Vasquez received the initial casualty report at 3:47 in the morning, Geneva time, and by the time the sun rose over the Unified Defense Council's headquarters, she had already made a decision that would define the remainder of her tenure, and reshape humanity's relationship with the wider galaxy for a generation to come. They think we're a civilization that responds to this kind of provocation with diplomatic protest and formal grievances filed through Ascendancy channels. She told the assembled council that morning, her voice carrying a controlled, deliberate calm that unsettled several members of the room more than open anger might have. I intend to demonstrate, as clearly and unambiguously as possible, exactly how wrong that assumption is. The Threll Ascendancy had built its 400-year sphere of influence across the eastern reaches of the galaxy's spiral arm, on a foundation of carefully managed proxy conflict. Maintaining loose, deniable relationships with pirate confederations, raider fleets, and border militias throughout contested territory, allowing the Ascendancy to project influence and extract resources from weaker neighboring civilizations, without ever formally committing its own military to conflicts that might draw broader diplomatic scrutiny. Humanity, having established formal contact with the wider galactic community only 6 years earlier, occupied a position the Ascendancy's strategic planners had assessed with considerable confidence as ideally suited to this arrangement, too new to the galactic stage to possess meaningful military deterrent capability, too eager for peaceful integration into established diplomatic structures to risk the kind of aggressive retaliation that might jeopardize its still fragile standing among more established species. High Regent Vesa Korath, overseeing the Ascendancy's border strategy from the administrative capital of Threlos Prime, had approved the general pattern of tolerated raiding along the Kethra corridor, with barely a second thought, viewing it as a low-risk method of testing humanity's resolve, while maintaining full deniability regarding any direct Ascendancy involvement. The humans will file their formal protest through diplomatic channels, as they always do, Korath told her senior strategic staff, in the routine briefing that followed initial reports of the Meridian-7 attack, still unaware of the convoy's true nature or the significance of those killed aboard it. We will express appropriate regret, offer token compensation, and remind them gently that policing every independent raider confederation along a contested border corridor exceeds even the Ascendancy's considerable capabilities. This is a pattern they have accepted without meaningful escalation for 3 years. I see no reason to expect this instance will differ. It was, within 72 hours, revealed to be the most consequential misjudgment of Korath's 4-decade career. Secretary-General Vasquez's response, bypassed diplomatic channels entirely. Rather than filing the formal protest the Ascendancy's border strategists had confidently anticipated, Earth's Unified Defense Council authorized immediate deployment of the Constellation Strike Group. 3 vessels built around the very sensor and defense technology Dr. Tanaka's team had spent 2 years developing, technology whose existence the wider galaxy had no prior knowledge of, and whose capabilities Ascendancy intelligence services had never had the opportunity to properly assess. "We are not seeking a diplomatic resolution to this incident," Vasquez informed. The assembled Ascendancy diplomatic mission on Earth. In a formal communication delivered less than 18 hours after the attack, the individuals responsible for the deaths of 73 Terran citizens, as along with any Ascendancy authority, found to have provided material support or deliberate tolerance enabling that attack, will face direct consequence. This is not a request for consideration. It is notification of action already underway. Ambassador Thesic Vorn, the Ascendancy's senior diplomatic representative on Earth, found himself, for the first time in a 20-year diplomatic career, entirely uncertain how to properly characterize the communication he had just received. "Secretary-General, I want to be certain I understand your intention correctly," Vorn said. "You are proposing unilateral military action against raider forces operating within contested, Ascendancy border territory, without prior diplomatic consultation or formal declaration through recognized galactic conflict resolution channels." "I'm proposing exactly that, Ambassador," Vasquez replied. "Your government has spent 3 years allowing raiders, operating under its tacit protection, to strike Terran assets with complete impunity, confident that humanity's inexperience with galactic diplomatic protocol meant we would continue absorbing those losses through formal complaint rather than direct response. I'm here to correct that assumption, clearly and immediately, rather than allow it to persist through months of diplomatic proceedings while further Terran lives remain at risk." The Constellation Strike Group engagement with the Kethra Raider Confederation, conducted 11 days after the Meridian-7 attack, represented humanity's first sustained offensive military action beyond its own solar system, and revealed, in devastating fashion, exactly how significantly Earth's classified defense research had outpaced what the wider galactic community, including the Ascendancy itself, had assumed possible for a species so recently arrived on the interstellar stage. Dr. Tanaka's sensor technology, which she had not lived to see fully deployed, allowed the Constellation Strike Group to track and predict raider fleet movements throughout the Kethra corridor, with a precision no conventional detection system in the region had ever achieved, converting what should have been a difficult extended pursuit through contested territory into a series of swift, decisive engagements that dismantled the Raider Confederation's operational capacity within a matter of days. So, High Regent Korath, monitoring the engagement's progress from Threllos Prime with mounting alarm, found herself confronting reports that bore no resemblance to the modest, easily contained conflict her strategic planners had originally anticipated. "Regent, the Kethra Confederation's primary fleet has been effectively destroyed," reported her chief military analyst, Dessa Van, presenting battle assessment data that continued updating with unwelcome frequency. "Human forces demonstrated detection and targeting capability considerably beyond anything in our threat assessments. We significantly underestimated their technological development, Regent, and I'm concerned this error may extend well beyond simply their military sensor capability. Are Ascendancy forces directly threatened?" Korath asked. "Not yet, Regent. Human forces have restricted their engagement specifically to confirmed raider assets, avoiding any direct confrontation with formal Ascendancy military units. But their formal diplomatic communication makes clear this restraint reflects deliberate policy rather than any limitation on their actual capability. They are, in effect, demonstrating precisely how much further this conflict could escalate, should we choose to formally involve ourselves in defending forces we have thus far only informally supported." The formal diplomatic reckoning that followed, conducted over the following month between Secretary-General Vasquez and increasingly anxious Ascendancy officials, produced an outcome considerably more consequential than any resolution that the galaxy's other established civilizations had anticipated from what most had initially assumed, would be a brief, one-sided punitive action against a minor pirate confederation, rather than simply accepting Earth's demonstrated capacity for decisive retaliation and quietly adjusting its border policies. The Ascendancy found itself compelled, under mounting pressure from neighboring civilizations who had taken considerable notice of humanity's unexpected demonstration of strength, to formally acknowledge its prior tolerance of raider activity along the Kethra corridor. An admission that triggered broader scrutiny of the Ascendancy's entire proxy conflict strategy across multiple contested border regions. High Regent Korath, addressing the Ascendancy's ruling council in the aftermath of negotiations that had concluded considerably less favorably than her initial assessment of the situation had suggested they would, offered an accounting that would be studied within Ascendancy strategic academies for years afterward. We assessed humanity as a young civilization, eager for peaceful integration and unlikely to risk escalation over losses it would be diplomatically encouraged to absorb quietly. Korath told the council. That assessment was based on 6 years of limited contact and a pattern of restrained diplomatic engagement that we mistook for the full extent of their capability and resolve, rather than simply see their chosen posture. Up to that point, we failed to consider that a young civilization operating a still developing deterrent capability might simply be waiting for sufficient provocation and sufficient readiness before revealing precisely how far it was prepared to go to protect what it valued. We handed them both, in a single convoy we assumed carried nothing worth defending decisively. Secretary-General Vasquez, addressing Earth's Unified Defense Council in the aftermath of a conflict that had, within a single month, fundamentally altered the wider galaxy's understanding of humanity's resolve and capability, offered a reflection considerably more personal than the formal, diplomatic language of the preceding week's proceedings. They expected us to grieve quietly and file our objections through proper channels, the way every account of our species suggested we would, she told the assembled council. I understand why. We've spent 6 years demonstrating patience, careful diplomacy, and a genuine desire for peaceful integration into a galactic community considerably older and more established than our own. I don't regret a single day of that approach. But patience was never the same thing as an absence of limits, and I think the galaxy needed to understand, clearly and unambiguously, exactly where ours lay. 73 people died aboard that convoy, including one of the most brilliant scientists our species has ever produced. Diplomatic protest alone was never going to be an adequate answer to that loss, and I refuse to apologize for choosing something more decisive instead. In the years that followed, the incident became known simply as the Meridian Response. Studied extensively across dozens of civilizations throughout the galaxy's eastern spiral arm as the definitive turning point in how the wider interstellar community understood humanity's place among its established powers. No longer regarded as a young, cautiously accommodating species content to absorb provocation in exchange for peaceful integration, Earth emerged from the incident as a civilization whose patience, while genuine, carried firm and clearly demonstrated boundaries that no subsequent power throughout the galaxy's contested border regions ever again mistook for weakness. The Threll Ascendancy in the decades that followed, quietly abandoned its broader proxy conflict strategy across every border region touching Terran territory, a policy shift Ascendancy historians would later attribute directly to a single, catastrophic miscalculation made on an ordinary morning along the Kethra corridor, when a raider confederation operating under casual Ascendancy tolerance struck what it assumed was an unremarkable civilian convoy, and discovered, far too late, exactly how wrong that assumption had been. A memorial was raised at the Unified Defense Council's Geneva headquarters, bearing the names of all 73 who died aboard Meridian-7, Dr. Tanaka's name inscribed first among them, and it became, in the years that followed, a place visited not only by grieving families but by newly arrived diplomatic delegations from across the galaxy, curious to understand the incident that had so thoroughly reshaped how their own civilizations approached negotiations with Earth. Secretary-General Vasquez, in the final years of her tenure, would often bring visiting dignitaries there personally, offering the same brief explanation each time, that the memorial existed, not as a monument to victory, but as a reminder of exactly what had been at stake the morning she chose to answer violence with something more decisive than words. And why she never once regretted making that choice. Dr. Tanaka's sensor technology, refined and expanded in the years following her death, ultimately became the foundation of Earth's broader deep space defense network, a legacy her research team continued building in her name long after the woman herself was gone. It was, in the end, the quiet, unglamorous work of scientists and engineers, rather than any single dramatic battle, that had truly secured humanity's place among the galaxy's established powers. The battle above Kethra Corridor had simply been the moment the rest of the galaxy finally noticed what Earth had already spent years quietly building, and finally understood that a species capable of building something that significant in secret was not one whose limits could ever again be safely assumed.